Evening, everyone. Welcome yet again to another. Everyone is logging in here on YouTube and on Facebook, so I'm just going to give everyone a couple minutes to join us. Hi, Mr. Mayo. Hi, Kajal. Good to see you guys. Jane Reed. We're all doing very well. It's good to hear from you. Mia Fenter's just logged in. Nice to see you. I really hope all this material and stuff we're putting together for you guys is proving to be helpful. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a big experiment doing stuff so differently. But we're loving it. We're loving every moment of it. Engaging with our church in such a different way has been an awesome experience. And we really hope that during this kind of tough time that we're facing here in lockdown, that it's brought life and it's brought some goodness to your screen. So I'm going to kick off in a couple minutes. Hey, Caitlin De Beer, Roxy Geldenes, good to see you. Andrew Warrener, nice to see you guys. Checking in here on Facebook, Terrence. Oh, Dean, logging in all the way from America. Good to see you, bro. Let me know if I need to fix anything with my hair. Cool, we're going to kick off with some worship now. And I just want to open up in some prayer. If you're wondering, we're going to be singing Here Again by Elevation Worship, and then maybe a little bit of Be Still. So if you want to pull up lyrics and that and sing along with me, please do. And sorry for the reverb. I know it sounds super weird. I didn't have the ability to turn it off. It's too difficult for me to multitask to that extent. So just put up with the angelic sound for now, and I promise you, it will make sense when I start singing, put it that way. Cool, so we're going to sing Here Again by Elevation. If you want to find those lyrics and sing along with me. Then we're going to go off to a message from Paul Taylor. So let's just pray together before we get going. Father, we just thank you for this time that we get together. Thank you for this community. Thank you for Olive Tree Church. Thank you for everyone online with us right now and everyone still to go online. And Lord, we just pray that you bless this time. That really is just such food to our souls. And God, we just want to say that we love you. And this time is completely dedicated to you, to knowing you more, to falling deeper and deeper in love with you.
All you are, will you meet
all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again? Oh, not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? Jesus, meet us here, 'cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again? Oh, meet us here, Jesus. Oh, meet us here, Lord. You're all we want. Oh, Father, you're all we want. Unless you come, will you meet me here again? 'Cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again? I'm not enough unless you come. All I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again? Oh. And Father, that's our prayer tonight. That right where we're at, in our lounges, in our dining rooms, in our bedrooms, God, that you'll just meet us where we're at. You'll meet us here tonight. And Father, we lift up the word that Paul has prepared for us. And we really pray that it just sinks deep into our hearts and sets us up for a great week, Father. And Lord, we just lift up all these midweek online communities doing whatever they can to meet together. Father, I pray that through the Zoom calls and the WhatsApp videos, God, that connection will transcend those places, Father. And that we won't feel disconnected, but instead we'll feel such a deep connection because we gather around you and only you. So Lord, I pray to just bless the rest of this evening. Bless everyone where they're at. We pray in your name. Amen. Cool. Thank you, everyone. We're going to kick straight into Paul Taylor's message for life groups. So please enjoy, and I'll check in with you a little bit later.
Well, good evening, friends, and welcome to this next set of life group content. You are in my home, but not at the exact moment that you're watching this, just to be honest with you, because it will need to be known that I have filmed this beforehand. Otherwise, you're going to have an existential crisis when you see me commenting in the side at the same time as speaking on the screen. So I filmed this a little ahead so that Justy can do all of his wizardry and connect some worship to it and so on. But yeah, it's wonderful to be with you. It's wonderful to have this opportunity to meet with you all on a weekday night and set you up for your next life group conversations. I'm looking at the camera, but behind it is my wife, Bern, with a baby strapped to her, headphones on, organizing the footage and the focus. And I don't know if I've ever seen a more multitasking and capable-looking person. I wish the camera could turn, but she's shaking her head. Okay, so tonight what we're going to discuss is Balaam again. We're all interested in him now, I imagine, after the Sunday sermon. And there was a whole lot in my researching of him that couldn't end up in the sermon, but I'd like to just draw your attention to some of it. I don't know if it's going to make brilliant sense, but as I was studying him, I kept on thinking I was getting these glimpses of truths about relationship. So we're going to end up talking about relationships tonight and how to have them from a place of blessing and how to have relationships cause us more blessing in our lives. If we are the blessed people of God, if we assume that there's blessing in everything, then we can expect to, as we align ourselves with Him and trust Him, to see blessing in our relationships. But most of the stress, in fact, I would argue almost all of the stress in our lives that sticks around for any length of time is relational. I know there's sort of extreme momentary stress that other things cause, and I'm sure many of you will be shouting about finances, but the deep stress that lasts long is, I think, always relational. Even when maybe it looks like finances on the surface, it'll have something to do with our relationship with our families and our desire to provide or whatever. And so getting our relationships right, causing our relationships to be a source of blessing, is one of the most crucial things we can do. And often we end up having relationships that don't cause us much blessing, where we are not creating blessing in them, and they end up being a source of stress or fear, and there's often lots of disconnection. And so during this lockdown period, we have time and maybe the headspace to be picking up the phone, mending fences, improving the relationships in our lives. You've been trapped with some of your nearest and dearest for a long time now, and I'm sure that's exposed some stuff. And so I'm hoping that some of my musings on Balaam, which give us a backdoor into relationships, and a fascinating text in Romans, are going to really bless you and allow you to have great conversations about how to bring your relationships into the space of a blessing in your life. Okay, so let's talk about Balaam. That moment where he gets confronted by the angel, to me it seems to reveal quite a lot. As I mentioned in the Sunday sermon, it at first can look as though God is being a bit flaky or unfair. He sends Balaam on his way with instructions to go, and then sends an angel to oppose him, and God is now angry that he's gone, and angry with the way in which he's going. And the more I've stared at that account, the more I'm convinced that it had to do with the motives of Balaam's heart, that God found the way Balaam was going selfish, reckless, and stubborn. It was something that had gone on in the motive behind what Balaam was doing. And I think it's always about motives, isn't it? You can do something, but for the wrong motive. Someone can do something to you, which on the surface seems okay, technically kind or technically considerate. But if you get a gut feel that their motives are selfish or condescending or manipulative, you pick up on it quite quickly, don't you? And then this sort of surface content of the WhatsApp or content of the work email isn't the point. It's the motive behind that message that you start to doubt, that starts to cause you stress and anger. And that's certainly the case in our relationship with God. God is radically committed to the motives of our hearts. And as Balaam heads off on this mad quest of his, intending to try and earn a profit, intending to harm the people of God, intending to disobey the spirit of God's instruction while trying to obey technically the letter of God's instruction, he ended up in trouble with God. He ended up damaging his relationship with God. And God teaches us an amazing lesson because he confronts him immediately when he is not convinced about Balaam's motives. That's massive. That's a really interesting lesson for me, that God immediately confronts Balaam. But he does so in stages. So let's just assume this is us in the story, okay? And let's take God out of it because that can confuse the matter and say it's you and your boss And you have ended up getting the impression that your boss hasn't got your best interest at heart. You end up having this impression that in your workspace there's someone who is not speaking well of you behind your back or is hurting you, and it's awkward because it's your boss that you think is doing this. Okay. So what God does is immediately confronts Balaam, but it's sort of gentle first time around. The angel gets in the way of Balaam, but it's not confrontational. It doesn't force the issue. I'm wondering maybe if God is still expecting that Balaam, if he can get his head right, would be able to recognize that God is interrupting him. Balaam is stuck in whatever is going on in his head and doesn't see the angel. The donkey does, as we know, and heads off and skirts around the angel through a field. Then God ramps it up a little further, confronts him in a vineyard where there's difficult possibilities to get around the angel. So this is a little more clear, a little more confrontational. But once again, for reasons that I'll guess at in a moment, Balaam is unable to see the angel, and the donkey squeezes past and hurts his foot, etc. And then finally, because God so values relationship, I believe, he sticks with the program and confronts Balaam a third time, and this time there's no getting around it. This time they're forced into confrontation with one another, so that God is able to say, hey, say only what I want you to say. I don't trust that you're going to say only what I want you to say. I think your motives have gone skew. And Balaam admits and recognizes that's the problem. I think it's beautiful that God has a tiered approach to confrontation, and I think we can learn a huge amount from that. Many of us just don't do it at all, right? We start to suspect the boss is being inconsiderate, and we just get mumbly and grumbly and start looking for other work, or start moaning about him behind his back, or start giving shorter and shorter answers to requests, and start putting less of our heart and soul into the work we do. We start to sort of subtly sabotage our relationship with that person. God is far wiser than that, and I think he calls us to be wiser than that. And so he models for us, not only here, but I see it often through Scripture, this loving confrontation that the people of God are called to be able to do, because we have the confidence and the resources of love to be able to do so. We're not going to sabotage our relationships with people when they hurt us. And so we can start to confront. But it's interesting that God, even though he has the right, and he's all-knowing, unlike us, so he really does know what's going on inside Balaam's heart, where you and I would never be able to be so sure, he still is gentle about it. He's still subtle. Balaam misses it because Balaam's eyes aren't open. But I love that God starts kind of gently, then gets a little more confrontational, and then eventually forces the issue. We would do well to bring things up quickly, to not sweep them under the rug, but to start really tentatively in the sense of the judgments we're going to make. So if I want to raise something with you or raise something with my boss, my initial assumption should always be that there's something else going on that I don't understand, that it isn't just the worst possible version that I've interpreted. I've just assumed this person's motives are evil, that they hate me or don't care about me or think they're better than me. Balaam does exactly that in the story, because in each of these moments when God is confronting him, he then confronts his donkey. And he beats his donkey and is mean to his donkey. And when the donkey asks him what's going on, Balaam's response is telling. Balaam says, "You're trying to make a fool of me." When you have a guilty conscience, you so easily flick into that insecurity because you know you're not actually up to the right things. And so that flashes out in this cruelty towards his animal. So Balaam has confrontations with his donkey, and he assumes he knows the donkey's motives. I know this sounds daft because we're talking about a donkey. But don't we do that in our confrontations? We just assume we know the other person's motives. And so either we sabotage the relationship and write them off, or if we do confront, we come running in hard and we start assuming that we're experts on the other person's internal world. You are not an expert on anyone other than yourself. You have no right to claim you know what other people's motives are, even if you think you have a really good guess. You get to start tentatively. And I love that the angel is kind of modeling that as in an allegorical way, that you can start gently and offer suggestions and offer some insight into your experience. Hey, boss, I don't know really if this is miles off track. I'm sure you have another perspective on this from the one I do, but I just want to let you know how I'm feeling right now. And you can be subtle and gentle while ensuring you have that conversation. If your boss is like Balaam and is actually in the wrong or is tied up in his own stress, he may miss it. He may glide on past that confrontation, and so then God does a second. and forces the issue a little further, really forces the confrontation, makes it harder to get away from. Instead of just a corridor conversation, he sends the email, he sets up the appointment. If it's a family member, he schedules the Zoom call and forces the issue, brings the matter to a head. Hey, I'm feeling this, I'm worried about your motives. Balaam misses it a third time, and so then finally God brings it to a head, and that's the point when God gives an instruction. Say only what I tell you to say. I know in my own marriage, and I know in relationships, even in the workspace, that when we choose to use an instruction, in fact, even with our children, we need to be aware that we are putting a great load on the relationship. An instruction assumes a huge amount of connection, that you have a huge amount of credit in the bank with this person, that they're willing to voluntarily follow your instructions. It's a stress test to put an instruction on a relationship. And we should avoid it, actually, if we can. We can offer insights from our perspective. We can make suggestions. We can give invitations. Hey, if you were to do this, it would make me feel. That's an invitation. And as soon in the process as possible, if we can solve this relational thing, we have escaped with doing as little damage as possible. If it has to ramp up to the point where you are making judgments and giving instructions, quite a lot of damage has been done and quite a lot of repair is going to be needed. It's still absolutely worth doing. The confrontation must happen. To sweep it under the rug, to just tolerate, to just get mumbly and grumbly and start sabotaging the relationship is a guarantee that you're damaging the relationship. Whereas going the confrontation route, there's the risk of damaging the relationship, but there's also the great promise of repairing it. So we must do it. But just a word to the wise. Let's scale up our interventions as far as possible so that we give the person the opportunity to respond to an invitation instead of obeying an instruction. That we give people the opportunity to sense a hint that you're giving or pick up on a suggestion you're making as opposed to having to wait until they're receiving an instruction and a correction. If you've let it get that far, then it's regrettable. And so you want to believe the best about people and give them as many opportunities ahead of time, if possible. So that's a fascinating little sequence that goes on with Balaam. He does, as we know, end up doing the dirty on Israel at the end of the story for the sake of monetary gain, and gives instructions to Balak to send women in to tempt the Israelite men, who then break faith with God and end up in idolatry. It's a sordid end to the story. But this whole process ends up getting quoted quite often in the Bible. We have this principle of Balaam that we spoke about on Sunday, that God, once he's blessed something, it can't be cursed. But there's some other principles that come out of the story of Balaam that get quoted later on in the Bible, to Peter, elsewhere, Revelation, where we hear about this idea of being motivated by dishonest gain. And it got me wondering, if we've already seen stuff about relationships in Balaam and God's interactions and Balaam and the ass's interactions, is there something else that we can pull out of this from a relational perspective? And the idea of honest versus dishonest gain, I don't know if it was just a late night brain wrinkle, but it got me to the idea of what we end up owing one another in relationships. It doesn't matter if you don't follow my leap there, because what it took me to, as I've been reflecting on this and thinking about how to do relationships in a way that doesn't cause dishonesty and profiteering off one another, I ended up in Romans 13, which is just a fascinating chapter for these times. Romans 13 is most well known because it's there that you find most clearly articulated our instructions to obey the government, that the people of God are called to respect the leaders of their land because God has put them in place. Even if they're not believers, even if they don't recognize that they're being used by God, they are. And so we have a responsibility to pay our taxes, to pay what's owed, to give respect and honor where due, to obey the law of the land. And that's amazing at times like this, that we're called to pray for our leader, to pray for President Ramaphosa, who is doing, I think, the best possible job under such difficult circumstances. But even if you disagree wholeheartedly with me, if you're a Christian, you're called to pray for him and to pray that God would strengthen him. And we're then taken from that conversation about paying your taxes, paying your debts, giving respect and honor where it's due, to a seamless change into a conversation about how we have a debt in relationships as well. And I just want to finish with this from verse 8. Let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another. For whoever loves others has fulfilled the law. The commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and whatever other command there may be, are summed up in this one command. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. That the people of God have a debt to pay. And that debt is towards God, not towards people. This debt of being beholden to love others is something that we owe God, not we owe people. That's interesting because that means that the people in question don't have to earn our love. It's not whether they're worthy of it or not. Even husbands and wives are told to love one another out of reverence for Christ, not out of affection for one another. That Christians have this strange formula that goes on in our relationships. We're out of gratitude for the way God has loved us, gratitude for the fact that He has given us life, that He has loved us and has redeemed our lives, the fact that He is involved, the fact that He is glorious. Anything we think we owe God, He consistently asks us to pay what we think we owe to Him, to pay what is due to Him, to others, to the people that He has created, to His creation whom He loves. And so, as I love God, I end up owing Him. It's a strange language to use, I know, because Jesus has paid our debt in full, etc. And yet God is saying, well, if you want to give me something, if you want to make right your relationship with me, if you want to express what you feel you owe me, a debt of love or gratitude, pay it to the least of these. Pay it to these people whom I created. If I love God, I ought to love who He loves. That's a huge idea, that you and I, if we're going to owe something to God, we get to pay it out in the form of love to people around us. And that's all we should owe them. And as we love our neighbor, then we end up not doing them harm. There's some amazing ideas in that. Firstly, you and I should owe each other nothing other than a debt of love. That means that when I start allowing other people to run up credit with me, I'm doing them no favors at all. Let me explain that statement. When I tolerate, when I keep my quiet, keep my peace, even though I'm busy getting offended by you, when I allow you to hurt me, but I don't coach you and let you know in the form of feedback, in the form of those confrontations that we have just seen God have with Balaam, if I don't let you know that you're busy hurting me, that you're busy digging yourself into debt, that you're making me, at least in my own mind, think that you owe me something, I'm doing you no favors at all. I'm causing you unwittingly to disobey Romans 13, which says that you're supposed to owe me nothing but your debt of love, which in fact has to do with how glorious God is. It has nothing to do with how much I deserve it. That's quite challenging. We use this debt terminology more than you might realize. We talk about paying someone back. We say, you owe me an apology. We use these terms because we have this kind of debt and credit idea, even if it's subconscious, in the way we do relationships. I've been generous to you, but now I have a little string attached to that generosity. I'm trying to get you to do something. I'm trying to manipulate you in some way because I feel like you owe me. And I think I'm going to be able to call in that debt. So I go through the motions of doing some nice things for you in order that I then get to call those debts in and get you to behave the way I want you to behave. This way of doing relationships, this way of subtly controlling one another, subtly allowing each other to get into debt with each of us. I don't know if that metaphor is ringing true, if you're starting to see how possibly you do this or have allowed this to be done to you. That must stop in God's people. We're called to owe each other nothing but a debt of love. And a debt of love that is a debt with God anyway, which means I freely love you. You don't deserve it, you don't have to. And I'm just wondering if in your conversations later on this week or after this message that you're able to start to discuss with one another how you might change the way you're doing relationships, what steps you might need to take. If you feel like you need to forgive someone because you've been holding them on the line, they've got a debt with you that you've not cleared. Perhaps part of forgiving actually means you need to confront. Because friends, if there's anything I've learned, it's that forgiveness and silence are not the same thing. In fact, they very rarely work together. That if I'm going to forgive you properly, I'm going to need to ensure that I'm understood so that our relationship can continue. You can forgive from a distance. You can shoot some intercontinental long-distance forgiveness bomb towards someone who's never going to be in your life again, and that'll just be good for you. But that doesn't do anything for the relationship. If I want to forgive someone but still have a relationship with them, then 9 times out of 10, that can't be silent. I'm going to need to confront gently, slowly at first, but ensure that I'm understood, so that then when I'm offering forgiveness, they understand what they're being forgiven for, but also it allows me in that process to realize that maybe what I think I'm forgiving you for isn't what you were doing in the first place. And the whole thing can change focus, and I recognize there was something else going on. There was a different variable altogether. Balaam, if he just decided to forgive his donkey for being bad at directions, would never have understood the whole story. It's only when the donkey goes, hey, have I ever treated you like this before? Balaam goes, oh, actually, no, you haven't. Something else might be going on. And that's the moment when he sees the angel. So I wonder if in some of the relationships where I feel I'm owed an apology, and so then I decide to release that debt and I decide to forgive, if I never have a conversation, a confrontational but loving conversation, I'm never going to know that maybe there was some other variable going on all along. That this person who'd never treated me like that before maybe didn't suddenly turn into a selfish person who doesn't care about me. Maybe there's some other explanation which I need to get my head around so that I'm not forgiving for something that was totally illegitimate to have to forgive for. And so forgiveness and silence, if you're expecting the relationship to move forward, very rarely coexist. So that's going to be the discussion. How might you remove some of these debts and credits out of the relationships that you're in and owe nothing but a debt of love, but then start to have some proper conversations that allow that love to flow freely, that it's not kept a secret, that what people owe isn't kept a secret, and the fact that you love people isn't kept a secret either, but it's actually known and enjoyed. And I trust that in that discussion, you're able to come up with some practical, okay, I'm going to phone so-and-so. I'm going to get on the line. We're going to set up a Zoom call. I need to forgive this person. I need to ask their forgiveness, etc., so that we can be the people of love who the world desperately needs at this moment. I hope that's been helpful. I hope that blesses you. Feel free to ask questions in the comment section along the side here, because I'd love to hear stories or feedback or information on how you think this might play out in your life. God bless everyone. Cool. Good evening.
Thank you, Paulo. Wow, yeah, some amazing stuff to think about. How do we love unconditionally, and how do we, I guess, drop the debts that we have carried against people in our lives? And I think if ever there was time to take stock of relationships and think about those around us, and maybe where we felt hurt or we have felt pain in our direction, and we carry this thing of resentment, like let's find the time and the space now with what we have to really seek God and go, God, I haven't had the strength to forgive. Will you meet me here? Will you show me how you loved me so that I can reveal that same love towards the people around me? I really love that challenge, Paula. So thank you so much for that. But that's it. That's it from me this evening. Thank you so much for being online with us. If you're going to go meet with your life group tonight, we really hope that this has been a blessing for all of you. And if you're not and you haven't got a life group, either email us at info@otc.org.za and we'll do our best to place you. But we've just been encouraging people week after week to ring up a friend, to ring up a neighbor, and start your own little community wherever you're at. We really want to be missional in this time. We have a beautiful opportunity to reach friends and those that have not heard this amazing message that we're talking about so regularly. And so I really want to encourage all of you to take that initiative and phone up a friend, phone up a neighbor, and start a group yourself. But that's it from all of us here at Olive Tree Church. We really pray that this has blessed you. And thank you for logging in with us live. And have a great rest of the week. God bless.